Welcome to Interactive Storytelling. In the previous videos, we've reviewed two of Murray's three aesthetic categories for interactive media. This time we turn to the third, transformation. If agency originates from interactivity and immersion from the willing suspension of disbelief, then transformation stems from identification. It's an important factor when thinking about the interactor's motivation beyond agency and immersion. Computers are capable of creating and simulating environments for roleplay, which allows the interactor to transform their identity and shapeshift into a new role. But what does transformation actually mean? It is a bit difficult to pinpoint it exactly because it can mean three different things. The key thing is to differentiate what happens to the interactor's identity in the real world and what happens to their identity in the story world. The first type of transformation is masquerade, where the interactor can change to someone else for the duration of the experience. Here the interactor's identity stays the same in the real world, but changes in the story world. In digital, as well as in real-world games, the player often takes part in a masquerade. Not being in the position to become the world's greatest football player, one can still play with friends and pretend to be one of the famous footballers. Similarly, one could take an existing story or story universe and put oneself in it, to become Elizabeth Bennet or Radion Raskolnikov and try to make it in their shoes. The second type is variety, where the interactor can exhaustively experience a multitude of variations. Instead of having one identity in the story world, the interactor could have several. For example, Prom Week allows the interactor to control a group of high school students. To achieve the goals, the interactor has to take the role of various students and realize how their social lives are intertwined. It's not enough to identify with just one student, but the whole group. The third type is personal transformation, where the interactor takes a journey of changing themselves. Personal transformation is the hardest, if not impossible, to design precisely, as it depends on the interactor's personal history and situation. Instead, one can take a narrow area, such as an attitude or preconception, and try to stimulate the interactor to change. For instance, Fear Not aims at changing the attitudes towards bullying, and Nothing for Dinner the preconceptions on the needs of the family of a stroke patient. Now that we have seen all the three aesthetic categories, let's turn to look at the interactor's experience. We can discern four key phases. First, onboarding takes place when the interactor familiarizes with the story world. After that, the interactor takes a journey through the story world and encounters different events. Once the journey nears to an end, the interactor expects to receive an emotional, intellectual, or some other form of payoff from the conclusion. Finally, as with conventional stories, interactive stories also allow and even invite the interactor to re-experience the story world by starting the process all over. Let's go over these four phases one by one. In the onboarding phase, the interactor starts out and gets accustomed to the story world, its laws, rules and mechanics, as well as its theme, mood and characters. The user interface also requires onboarding because the interactor has to learn what their characters can do and how to make it do what they want. Onboarding is the phase that has to teach all these things to the interactor. This is a delicate phase because the interactor hasn't yet invested much in the experience and is more likely to give up. Because the interactor initially doesn't know anything about their character, not its background, personality nor intentions, and also the story world is new to them, we are facing the problem of amnesia. This has to be solved so that the interactor can get past the onboarding phase quickly and feels confident in facing the journey ahead. After the onboarding, the main part of the experience starts. This doesn't mean that we can leave the interactor completely unattended, but the story world could provide hints and indication on where they should go and what to undertake. This can take many forms. Characters can provide the needed indication. If the roster comprises mainly mobsters and other criminals, the interactor might be inclined to follow their lead and embrace the underbelly of society. As we saw earlier, the characters themselves can provide more or less direct hints to the interactor on the dramatically promising directions. Scenes often provide physical boundaries that support and guide the interactor. Events are clear game changers. Sometimes something dramatic happens which is not in the interactor's control. It can put the direction where the interactor has been proceeding into jeopardy and possibly reveal something that the interactor has not noticed before. Props and the object that the interactor carries and acquires, and possibly loses, are important to support the progress of the interactor. Traditionally, in adventure games, every object in the inventory has a special need. If there's an object which has not yet been used anywhere, it's a strong indication that the interactor should go and find a purpose for it. The story must come to an end at some point. Although it's possible to have an endless story structure, such as a narrative graph, usually there's a state or states that the designer has intended to be endings. How graceful or abrupt the ending isn't at all in designer's control, but we are back at the designer-interactor contract. The designer is obliged to provide an exit, and the interactor, playing their role wholeheartedly, should take one of the offered exits. If not, the designer can't guarantee, nor is responsible, that there's more to experience satisfyingly. But this isn't necessarily the end, because interactive storytelling calls for re-experiencing. You don't have to stop at the end of the story, but return back to the beginning and start anew. An interactor can have different motivations for re-experiencing interactive stories. It could be about making sense of things and to see how new fragments can be reconciled into the overall understanding of the story. It could be about finding out more to see whether there's more to the story that can be seen on the surface. The interactor might engage in trying out what-if scenarios by making different choices to see if they lead to different outcomes. One motivation could be the search for a deeper meaning and looking for an interpretation of the story world as an artistic creation. And of course, there are those interactors who just want to figure out how the system works and to understand the techniques used in putting the story world together. Here we see the unique character of interactive stories. They invite the interactor to return and re-experience. This concludes the 5th set of videos. In the 6th set, we move on to the 4th and final partaker, the story world. See you there.